Hey everyone, and welcome to the 30 Days of Courage. This is day one of our October event, and I am so excited to have you all here. I know people are already starting to join live, and I would love to hear from you. So if you are already tuning in, would you just drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from? And would really love to just be able to connect with you. One of the things that I love about the 30 days is that we do this live. Like, we can have a connection during the talks with the speakers. We're going to have a live Q&A after where you can ask your questions. So please do not be afraid to comment. Go ahead, and if any comments or questions come up during the talk, even before the Q&A, drop those in the comments and I'll make sure to scroll back and get them when we do the live Q&A. So the 30 Days of Courage, it's something that we've done for several years now here inside of the Facebook group. And for the entirety of October, we have amazing speakers. We have self care challenges that I'm going to tell you a little bit more about at the end of our talk tonight. We have free resources that we've created just for you and prizes that you can win. So, all kinds of exciting things. And tonight, we have a speaker who I think is really going to be powerful for us. Her name is Sarah Scott. She is a Hollywood actress, an intimacy coordinator, which we're going to be learning what that term means, and also a survivor herself. And when I talk to Sarah Scott, when I have gotten to know her a little bit over the last couple weeks, I can just tell how much she cares about survivors and also the knowledge and the information that she has to share. It's just going to be so, so good. So while we listen to this talk, I want you to interact as much as possible. Share your thoughts, share your questions. We're going to have the Q&A right after she's done speaking. And yeah, we're going to have so many cool things happening during the 30 Days of Courage. Thank you all so much for joining. And without further ado, I'm going to invite Sarah Scott onto the proverbial stage. Hey Sarah, how are you?
Hi, Ashley. I'm doing well. Thank you. How are you?
Oh, I am doing so good. I've been looking forward to this for really months, and I cannot wait to hear what you had to share with us. I know that you have been preparing your talk, and I don't want to take up too much more space and air so you can have the full breadth of time to be able to share. But I just want to say thank you, and I'm looking forward to the Q&A after your talk. All right.
Wonderful.
Awesome.
Wonderful. Okay, well, hi everybody. Hello. My name is Sarah Scott. Um, and I'm really excited to be here. Thank you, Ashley, for, inviting me into this space, for being curious about this work and for encouraging me to be courageous as well. So I'm so excited to be kicking off the 30 days of courage. I just want to acknowledge that it definitely took some courage for me to show up here tonight. I'm really eager to share with you. I think it's going to be a perfect and beautiful unfolding, and I want to get to anybody's questions that they possibly have at the end. But yeah, I wanted to acknowledge that I had my own procrastination and my own self doubt along the way in the journey to get here tonight. So, but I'm here. So I'm feeling courageous, and I hope you are too. And we can have an expansive conversation about something that's extremely passionate to me, and that is the work that I've started to do. So, as an intimacy coordinator, I'm also an actress and a survivor, and all of those things are really, meaningful to me in a way. So I just want to say things that I want to talk about today are I want to go over my understanding of how intimacy coordinators have quickly the become a foothold in the entertainment industry, and I'll also share how I personally became one. I will share what intimacy coordinators, or you might hear me say IC, That's the short version. What ICs do to improve the safety and the comfort of performers while on set. And then finally, I'd like to offer some tips and some suggestions on how I think that this work can actually be used practically in your life to improve your relationships. So, so I'll get in. I'll get started here. I don't have any slides for you tonight, so it's just my face. Um, but I hope you find it engaging. And again, please jot down any notes or questions that come up, and we'll take some time at the end for those. So, to begin, how did the role of the intimacy coordinator come to be, and how did I become one? So, just a little bit of background. I won't spend too much time on this, but I think it's important to contextualize um, where intimacy coordinators, where the start. A lot of us think that, like, oh, we've only been on sets for a couple of years now, but actually, this kind of advocacy work and intimacy staging has been happening in the theater for many, many years. Sometimes you'll hear them referred to as intimacy directors or intimacy choreographers. And so they've been staging intimacy for quite some time. Similar to when you're doing a production on stage, they'll have a fight director. So because in the theater, those nights, the plays, they have to be so repeatable. The movements and the choreography have to be down pat, completely safe and believable looking, and also repeatable night after night. That this kind of work really is important for those actors to achieve that, to achieve the believability and also the safety for their bodies. So as far as working on film and TV sets, which is what I do, and how um, where my career has taken off, that has only been, I'd say, some now again, some folks would say, oh, that's been happening for 10, 15 years, but truly the word intimacy coordinator, that term, I would say maybe 5, 6 years. Now I've been an actor myself for about 20 years, and I've done a lot of these hyper exposed scenes, we'll call them. I've appeared on screen partially nude or in very intimate scenarios. I performed simulated sex, and I never had someone there advocating. Although I will get to this later, I really could have used somebody. So the work to me is very personal in that way, because I've been in those shoes of the performers. And what I've found working now on the crew side of things, which has been very illuminating, and I have such admiration and respect for the crews. They are the first ones there, the last ones to leave, and they're the backbone of the entertainment industry, quite honestly. And I'm not, it's been funny coming into a role. I'm a department of one, and so um, it's not. I'm not always welcomed with the brightest smiles, but once people know what I'm there, I'm not there as like the prude police. I'm not. From HR. I'm not, going to write anybody up unless they really need to be. But once other crew members, especially in our makeup departments and in the wardrobe department, learn what it is that I'm doing, there's a lot of gratitude. And what I have learned from them is that they've actually been stepping out of their lane and having to do some of the work that I'm now doing as an intimacy coordinator, which is really out of their comfort zone, because actors are put into very vulnerable situations. And so sometimes it's the costumer that's advocating for the actor's needs when they don't have the voice, or a makeup artist who's really there for them, kind of holding space through something that's extremely sensitive. And so one of the things I've learned as a crew member is that with the budgets being so big and we're always so pressed for time, staying in your lane is so key. Everybody has their job, their function on a film set, and there's multiple people, and it's so important that we each stay in our lane. And so I've been still figuring out where my lane is, but it feels really good to have a place and to realize that this place has been very much needed um, in film and television. And that brings me to the Me Too movement, which I'm sure all of you are well aware of a little bit about that. But I will give you a little bit of background on that too, and how that affected this position and helped bring it to be. It's only in recent years, I would say, that we've, as a entertainment community, started to acknowledge the dysfunction and the abuse that pervades the workplace, um, and in the workspaces all over this country, and Hollywood being no different. Um, the original, I would say, purpose, from what I understand, Me Too was for, and it was initially voiced back in 2006 by a New York-based advocate activist named Tarana Burke. And the intention, as I understand, that she had was to empower sexually assaulted people through empathy, solidarity, and strength in numbers. And and then cut to 2017. Okay, the hashtag Me Too went viral, as many of you may know, when Alyssa Milano and others started to use it via Twitter, when all of the allegations started to come out about Harvey Weinstein, and the cases that were being brought against him. And so that had a ripple effect into, like I said, the workplaces all over this country and probably beyond the entire globe. But it really impacted Hollywood. It was a stark wake up call to something that we've all known about. It's kind of been the Hollywood secret, I would say. You know, I moved to Hollywood in 2002, aging myself a bit, but and I can remember hearing stories about, the casting couch and even Harvey Weinstein, very early on, and thinking, is that really real? Like, is that really how people get jobs? And I think there was a part of me that just didn't believe it. I'm sure that it was happening, but it didn't happen to me at the time. I mean, nobody I knew personally, but there was these stories and these sort of rumors, and and then the longer I worked and the more people that I became close with, um, the more those stories became closer to my life, and then those experiences actually became my life. And so then I was well aware that those secrets weren't, they weren't just rumors or happenstance. They were reality. Um, in 2020, Anita Hill, who works with the Hollywood Commission, they did a nationwide survey about workplace sexual harassment, and found that 69% of participants stated that they had seen progress in preventing sexual harassment since the Me Too movement began, but those individuals said that harassment still remains a pervasive problem in the industry. And so surveys like that started to help institutions and unions, SAG-AFTRA being the union that I'm involved with. um, it started to put a mirror in their faces, and it was really startling to me, who was on the inside track at that point with prevention, how little was being done to educate and to prevent and to hold people accountable for misconduct. Um, you know, I've learned a lot about what sexual harassment is, and some of you may know, some of you may not. Sexual harassment comes in a few forms, and one of the forms kind of is the casting couch. It's quid pro quo, which is Latin for this for that. So I'll give you a booking, I'll cast you in this movie if you give me XYZ sexual favor
Quid
or whatnot.
pro quo.
Um, and the other form of harassment would be like a toxic workplace environment, hostile workplace environment. And so And as I said, I started to recognize and see that this actually was happening. Um, and and again, Hollywood's open secret and the lack of accountability and the fear of the power dynamic that exists really rules everybody. Because one thing about Hollywood is that nobody has job security. um, I mean, I guess if you're working in the corporate sphere, you know, you have a little bit more security. But even directors, they may be the most powerful person on a film set, but when that job in that film wraps, that's the end of that job. For actors, especially, we are probably the most disposable, I would say. If you're not going to do this, we'll hire so and so. And the second that I remember being in a film, gosh, years and years ago, it was like a kind of a horror thriller movie, and all the other girls were going topless, and it wasn't worth it for me. The money wasn't very good, and the script wasn't very good either. And I made it very clear that I was not gonna do any nudity. And so I remember being on set, and I had to come out of a shower, and I had this white tank top on with a knife. I was gonna stab somebody, and so I was wet coming out of the shower, and so I knew I was like, I'm gonna put a bra on because if I don't wear a bra, you're gonna see right through my shirt. And I remember coming out of the shower and hearing this director's voice through a loudspeaker. He was on a microphone because I was on the set. He said, "Lose the bra," and I was just like, "Are you kidding me? Like, I'm not gonna take my no, no." And then, and this is kind of a layered story, but there was a B film crew shooting a behind the scenes kind of making of the movie about independent films, I guess. And when I saw that documentary, I learned that because I spoke up that day and said, no, there's no way I'm going to take this bra off, the producer or the director, whoever it was, the power to be's in that film, actually uh, complained about me being a diva. And I was just so hurt, I was so, it was just one of many situations in which that power dynamic and that power play on set really was personal because I wasn't trying to be a difficult actor. I wasn't. I was happy to have the job. I had been clear with my boundary, and they tried to push me and kind of make it like I was making a problem so that I would show nudity. So, and this was so many years ago. I mean, people have. Anyway, there are many stories of that, but I won't get into that too much. I'm just sort of laying the groundwork for the backdrop, I should say, for how this advocate role has come to be such an important one, I would say, on sets. And so yeah, as the conversation started to change, which it did, you might remember Me Too was kind of everywhere for a couple years. You would hear comedians laughing about it on stage. You'd hear, talk late night talk show hosts, and it would come up in scripts. It would just kind of be everywhere. Hashtag Me Too. Don't Me Too me. This became kind of a part of the local jargon, I would say. And it really put a much needed spotlight on the rampant sexual harassment and abuse and assault, like I said, is and was very prevalent in the entertainment industry. And so the secret was out. It was no longer a secret. After that hashtag, the hashtag Me Too, it went viral in late 2017. Facebook then reported that about half of its American users were friends with someone who had felt they had been sexually assaulted or harassed. So it was out. Secret was out, and we are now acknowledging what we'd all known, but been afraid to say out loud. Especially, I would say, the producers and the unions and the hiring folks. They could no longer cloak it with secrecy. It was out. And this brings me to, another personal story, but that was right around the time of this. So in 2018, I was cast in a TV pilot, a comedy that this experience changed my life. And for anybody listening who isn't familiar with what a pilot is, basically it's a standalone episode of a television series that is used to sell the show to a distributor. So when you make a pilot, you hope that it gets picked up, and then a network will say, okay, we're going to greenlight you for 10 episodes or something. So the pilot presentation that I was cast in, it was like a dream come true, an amazing job. And funny enough, or not so funny enough, the script of this project actually referenced the Me Too movement, or Me Too. In fact, there was a scene. I played a producer along with my half sister in the show, and we were two female producers trying to make it in Hollywood, in a man's world. And there's a funny scene where another producer, a male producer, is holding a casting for a butt double for Dame Judi Dench. Now, love Judi Dench, but the butt doubles that they were seeing were like these hot young 20 somethings. So that was the joke. It's like, are you kidding me? You're looking for a butt double for Judi Dench. And so clearly there was a line in there about, what do you want? You're going to get Me Too, something like that. So, cut to the chase. I was actually sexually harassed and assaulted by one of my co-stars on this project. And given the climate that we were in, given my experience with years of doing independent projects, and like I referenced before, really feeling that power dynamic kind of taking my voice away and my power, I was inspired. The courage within me finally came to a place where I felt I could speak out and speak up, and I did. And once I started speaking about this, I couldn't stop. That was how I dealt with that abuse, with that kind of assault. And I, started with the producers. I went to my agents. I talked to my union. Basically, talked to anybody who would listen to me, because I knew in my gut that the person that did this, that this wasn't a solo kind of lone experience. This was something that he did, and come to find out it was. So I was grateful that I listened to my gut in that situation. But yeah, I did everything that I felt I could do. I filed a complaint, like an official complaint with the union. He was found guilty, but there was little to no ramification, and I felt pretty unsatisfied, being that it was all confidential and nobody was going to know about it. So I continued to speak out about it. And in speaking out, I began uncovering, along with other leaders within the union, that we just weren't doing much, if anything, to, like I said, educate our members, fellow actors, and prevent this kind of harassment. And because everybody was so afraid before. And now that it was out, now that it was actually popular to be talking about these things, I myself found solace, and I found support with other survivors in becoming involved. And that's how I started to sit on committees with the union and speak on panels, and just see what I could do, see what I personally, could try and change. And I have found that the work itself, that kind of advocacy, or that kind of activist work, is really important, but it takes a long time for any little change to happen. Now, I will say there were some really great changes that have happened to protect actors. And one of those was this term I started to hear about, which was this intimacy coordinator. And at the time, I would say very few people or sets were using an intimacy coordinator, but it
I
started
can
to feel like, oh, maybe this could be something that is not like the magic bullet, but it's something that is going to be preventative, that's going to help empower performers who are the most vulnerable, and hopefully help change the landscape, so that crew and cast and everybody is sort of operating on a higher vibration, so to speak. Um, when people are respected and people have a voice and people's psychological and physical and psychological beings are being thought of, I think everybody is more successful. Everybody is benefiting
love
from
this
that.
is true,
So the
definitely.
second that I started to hear about this, I thought, oh my gosh,
I know exactly
this is really exciting, and it might be something that um,
that.
I want to do. So there was an awakening inside of me, and when I look back at the past 5 years, it really feels like the timing of my not so wonderful personal experience on set, it somehow mirrored what was going on more globally with this whole awakening. It's just my personal kind of journey with it. But, as I said before, we, Hollywood, you know, your own community, the workplace in this country, we could no longer live shrouded in secrecy. And so that was happening for me. I could no longer stay silent. And as
Um,
much as I still dream about being,
um,
a rockin' kick butt, actor with my own series, this departure for me in getting trained as an intimacy coordinator has been one of the most powerful things I've done for my personal life in all that I've learned. So that's what I did. I went and got trained, and I became an intimacy coordinator. So I want to now talk about what
um,
it is that we do. How does an intimacy coordinator create safer spaces for film and TV? I'm just gonna have a quick sip of water. So, just a side note on, I guess I would say, my own personal philosophy around this work is that I feel and believe that in order for actors to feel completely free and expansive, and to um, for them to be given the most promising environment to do like and create transformative work that we all love to see on screen, they must know the parameters, they must know the boundaries of the work, because it's an imaginative space, it's a make believe world, and it's not real. So we have to know the outline, the parameter in which we're working, so that we know how far we can go. And so that's what I hope to do, and make sure that every actor I work with shows up on set knowing their boundaries, knowing the parameter, and feeling safe in that space in order to be courageous enough to really go for it. Um, I'm there to liberate people. I'm there to liberate directors. I'm not there to police them. I want to assure that everybody is informed, on the same page, comfortable, and safe in their surroundings. So, um, the way I thought would be fun to just kind of break down, like, you know, the work that we do, I put it into 5 C's. Okay, so the 5 C's, I will explain my job function, um, with each of these bullet points to create the safe space. So the first one is clarity. This begins basically with me getting a script and breaking it down and flagging any intimate moments that I see, even if it's just a kiss, or um, if it's something where somebody's getting undressed, even if it's not romantic, or just undressing, anything that would have to do with intimacy, nudity, simulated sex, of course. Sometimes when it comes to working with minors, if there's, let's say, um, even two teenagers, holding hands or something. If it's like a romantic moment, I'll flag that. Um, Sometimes if I'm working, if it's clear that the actor is trans or non-binary or neurodiverse, I might flag it if it's a really sensitive subject matter, especially if there's any violence within a sexual context. So I read the script and I see what's in it. Why did they send it to me? And then I talk with the director and I get a really good idea. I get clarity on what the vision is. What does the director hope to achieve in this scene? What is their vision? How do they want to shoot it? Um, Basically, I look at it like I would if I were the actor with the part, and I think all the questions that I would have, and I get those questions answered. You'd be shocked at how many times I speak to an actor who's booked the role and they have no idea because not everything can be on the page. So that's where clarity is really important. And that brings me to the second C, which is communication. In the communication, that to me is about breaking down the power dynamic. So once I know the director's vision and I have an understanding of how this is going to be shot, then I communicate one on one with the actor. So that could be a Zoom call, that could be an in person meeting, or maybe it's just a phone call. But basically, because I'm not the one that's going to hire or fire anybody, we're on the level playing field. The communication between myself and the actor, it breaks down the power dynamic. It's a safe place for them to then tell me, I have a concern about this scene. I really don't like my stomach, and I mean, I'm okay with the nudity on the topless nudity, but I really don't want to show my stomach or something like this. And then they may not feel comfortable saying that to the director on the day. So the fact that they've shared that with me, I can then advocate for them by communicating with the costume department. Say, hey, what can we do? What kind of top can we put her in that, like, she can take the shirt down, but maybe we're covering her belly, that kind of thing. I'm also in the communication realm, answering questions that might come up. I'm providing ongoing support to the actor. I'm working with the legal team. We have what's called a nudity writer. So anytime, if you're an actor, an aspiring actor, or anytime you watch a show, and nowadays when you see there's nudity, let's say somebody's doing breast nudity and they're doing a simulated sex scene. So that has all been explicitly written out in what's called a nudity writer. And those are really important documents. It's a legal document that's drafted. And with our union now, if it's a union project, they have to be approved 48 hours in advance. And the reason that has become the new rule is because it prevents any last minute changes. Like I was saying about that film I did where I came out of the shower, I didn't sign a nudity writer and I didn't need to, right? Because I wasn't, but let's just say like, that last minute change, take the bra off, right? This legal writer would protect me from saying like, oh, well, I said I would do this, but I'm not going to do that. And there's no changing of it. So it all has to be written out and approved by the agent and the actor way before we get to set. And that's really key in helping everybody stay on the same page. It's still today, it's not always malicious. It's not always something that like somebody's trying to pull one over on somebody, but communication gets lost. I was recently working on a project where, and I won't get into too many details about this, but basically I showed up and there were two background ladies who had agreed to do topless nudity and rear nudity, but they weren't doing any frontal, nothing below the waist, frontal nudity. And the makeup department was about to put merkins on them, which is another kind of insider word for a merkin is a pubic hair wig, and it's often used in period pieces, especially, or just if the performer does not have pubic hair and the director or the vision is to have it, they will use these. They're called merkins. And so these two background women were just like deer in headlights, just like okay, they were, the makeup artist was about to put them on. I said, Stop, we do not have this covered." And I went and spoke to the director, and she said, "Sarah, I told you it was full nudity." She's very upset. And I said, "I'm sorry, it's not. That's not what you said." And it, again, I don't think it was malicious, but it's just about, there's so many things going on that it's my job, it's my sole job to know and communicate what's happening around the intimacy and the nudity. um, that I had to say no. We did not get that signed off 48 hours in advance, and so we couldn't do it, and everybody understood, and there were no hard feelings. But I'll tell you, the two background women were extremely grateful. So anyway, communication. The third C is consent, and I'll just quickly kind of go through what the 5 pillars of consent. And that is that, number one, consent is freely given. It's a choice made without being pressured or under the influence. Number two, it must be reversible. So you might say you're okay with it one day, and the next day you revoke your consent, and that's okay. Number three, it is informed. So there has to be awareness of the expectations and the details around it. Number four, consent has to be given, is enthusiastically given. It's enthusiastic consent, and it should be given enthusiastically. It's a clear yes. It's not a, yeah, I think so, or maybe. It's a definite yes. And the 5th pillar of consent is that it is specific. So when you're saying yes to one thing, that is what you're saying yes to. It's not an umbrella for all things. It's very specific. So that's consent. The 4th C is choreography. This is something that is really important with film and TV and in theater, as I was mentioning. I always try to use very desexualizing language, and I try to make it, very practical. We create anchors when we do choreography. It's like doing a dance. You create the A, B, C, and of course there's little wiggle room in between it to nuance it, but there's no need for simulated sex scenes to be spontaneous. I think Sean Bean recently said that intimacy coordinators are killing spontaneity, and this isn't the way true art is made. And what I want to say to that is bullshit, because the thing is, when you do a fight scene, you should not actually be scared. It shouldn't be scary, and it's very similar to doing a sex scene. Okay, it shouldn't be sexy. Okay, that's what actors do. They imbue the love or the passion or the romance or the fear in whatever sexualized context it is. So choreography is really important, and also making it believable with also masking and making sure that everybody's in a safe place physically. And then the 5th C is the closed set. So when we're on film and TV, we do a closed set anytime anybody's performing nude or in a simulated sex scene. And that just means that basically only the essential crew members and personnel are there. The actors must wear modesty garments, so there's no actual genitals touching. On porn sets, of course, there are, but that's not. I don't work in those spaces, but I have heard that intimacy coordinators are starting to work in the adult film world, which is fantastic. Because everybody deserves a voice and an advocate when they're doing this kind of work. But yes, so on the closed set we have modesty garments and barriers, and working with the director to communicate believability, and then ongoing. I'm always checking in on the actors on an ongoing basis to make sure that they're okay and that they're comfortable with what's going on. So yeah, in a nutshell, I know. I want to get to all of the things I want to talk to you about today. So I'm sorry if I'm going really fast. But basically, again, I think it's really important to understand like my role as an advocate, and kind of an overriding idea is like desexualizing the experience and the language that we use, and also just in a nutshell, making it less awkward. I have come away from too many sets as an actor feeling shamed, feeling embarrassed, As you know, I was assaulted, so traumatized, and it's just not necessary. We are professionals. Actors are professional working people, and they deserve to walk away feeling good about their day and good about their work. Um, so so yeah. With that said, I am going to go ahead and move into sort of the tips on how and some of the offerings I have for you about how I feel the work that I'm doing in these spaces can bridge and translate to you and the work that you do in your personal lives and in your relationships. I'm going to be speaking, mostly about like more romantic, sexual relationships, but I think that this also lends itself to professional relationships, to parent-child, to friendships. You know, it's so empowering to have boundaries, as I was saying, to know the space that you're working in, because again, it's like we're all the world is a stage, and we are all actors and performers in it, and so how wonderful when we can feel um, that we're advocating for ourselves, and that our needs are being met because we're voicing them and because we've built trust in ourselves. And so what I want to do is sort of bridge those 5 C's into into some offerings and some suggestions. So I have so let's start with clarity, the first C. And again, this is about determining your boundaries. So one thing I would suggest doing is to really take some space and some time to, if you haven't already done this, you might be a pro, is to check in with your sexual self when you're not with a partner, okay? Not when you're not on a date, when you're not in a charged environment. In fact, I would suggest, you know, taking this as like a journaling kind of exercise for yourself, or maybe you're out on a hike and a walk and you really want to just let your mind mull over um, what are some of the things that you like to do sexually? What are some of the things that you have heard about or seen on television or in porn and want to try? Um, uh, and what are some of the ways that you like to share intimacy? Not sexual necessarily, but just, for me, cuddling is such a big thing, and my partner struggles with cuddling. I laugh because we've been married for 8 years, and sometimes I'm like, I just want to cuddle, and every time we start to cuddle, it's like it always leads to something more, and so we've been talking about like having just a cuddle night. So getting in touch again with like, what are your boundaries? What are your yeses? What are your definite yeses that you consent to? What are your definite nos? Maybe write those down. And then what are your maybes? What are the things that you're curious about and maybe you want to get some more information around? Um, and then and then practice and one of the ways you can practice boundaries and getting clear about your boundaries um, is to say, when someone asks you something, the next time somebody asks you like, hey, Sarah, are you available to you know help me out with this project or something, is to before responding, okay, you pause and you check in with your body. How do you where how's it feeling? How are you feeling? And then ask yourself, do I need more information before making a decision? Okay, getting clarity for yourself, and also, for what it is that you really want. Okay, because so often, and I'll get into this, we fall into people pleasing, and that really, as we all do it, it doesn't really help anybody. And so, again, this is about building, your self love and self trust around, and really getting clear about what it is that you want and what you like. So, it's great to practice these things when you're not feeling guilty or pressure. So, bite off, little examples of things like, like I said, if a friend asks you to help them, and your normal gut response is to say yes, just stop, pause, think about it, ask some more questions, and then really check in with yourself and see if that's something that you're available for. Okay, so then we'll go to communication. And the thing I want to highlight about communication is eye contact. Um, we want to be looking for that consensual enthusiasm in our partners, okay? Eye contact is what brings us into the moment with your body and in the body that they are in. And there's actually some scientific neurobiological truth to this, because co-regulation is when two nervous systems help to regulate each other. And then one way to do this is to slow down and make eye contact. It's kind of like, you're dancing with someone. If you're doing a tango or a salsa, or even like a sexy fun, dance at a club, eye contact is so key in reading our partner, and also expressing to our partner that which we need, that which we want, that which we are not sure about, and that which we are not okay with. Our eyes are the window to the soul. And so if eye contact is difficult for you, you could even practice just simply sitting and making eye contact with your partner, or friends. That might help, your buddy. And in that communication, see also looking for signs, both verbally and non-verbally. So self-attunement is kind of like part of this, where you're checking in with yourself. Like I said, what would be an enjoyable experience for me? And then inquiring about what would be an enjoyable experience for your partner. Maybe that's something you have never talked about, and that could be a really great conversation to communicate with each other. And then having that dialogue, which can often be uncomfortable, but it can lead to very comfortable and fun places, which is listening to your partner, watching their body, or your friend, as I said, about something that you're sharing, and having a dialogue, practicing it, and sharing your desires. All of that helps to build really strong communication. Being vulnerable is extremely powerful, and it takes practice, though. And I always find that it's easy, even in a relationship like I said I've been in for a very long time. Doing this work as a professional has helped me to communicate really more truth about what it is I want. I think I was often operating from a place before of wanting to just be status quo, not rock the boat, please my partner, and really maybe not even knowing what it is I wanted, because I never took the time to ask myself. Okay, so that brings me to the third C, which is consent. And I see consent in our lives as a form of self-care. So putting consent into practice can be tough at first, but it's one of the best ways to build that muscle. And so again, as I was saying about people pleasing, like it's a learned survival skill. We all do it. Everybody does it, probably on a daily basis, but it actually can be very harmful, and because it's coming from a dishonest place. And so if you operate from a people pleasing standpoint, or just like I said, not wanting to be a diva, it can lead to self-doubt, and it can lead to resentment in our partners and in our professional relationships, if we've just been kind of going with something and not asking for what we really want, maybe in our jobs, doing something out of feeling like we have to rather than we want to. It can be harmful to our self, so I try to avoid it. Another thing of self-care, that if you don't already have a meditation practice, that's something that for me has really helped. And also I use mantras like I love myself. I trust myself. You know, I love myself. I love myself. Those have really made an impact on my life. Um, as a form of self-trust and building that muscle. It's a muscle just like anything else. You have to just keep working at it. So that's what's worked for me. And then for me, what that does is it allows us to show up as our more authentic self. And then when we're faced with decisions, especially in more heightened emotional or intimate scenarios, once you've worked on it, now you're at a first date or on a job interview, and it's heightened. You know that you're going to be bringing your most authentic self, because you've practiced and because you know what you want and what you're willing to do, and what you won't, what your no's are. And so I think that when we show up with conviction in those desires, we really have a more authentic connection with people. And so then it brings me to the fourth C, which is choreography. And for me, this is about, being present in our bodies. And really lately I've been thinking a lot about pleasure because I don't think that at least as a woman, I wasn't really taught pleasure, and that's so important, and the freedom around finding pleasure and going after pleasure, and even knowing what I desire. It wasn't until recently in my many years on this planet that I took a course, and it was like really confronting, but getting in touch with what I don't even know, what do I really desire, sexually. And that was extremely eye-opening for me. And so the choreography, I put this into choreography um, because I think it talks about to me, it's about creating more freedom. The way I talked about creating the freedom with the actors when they know the boundaries, I feel like it's the same kind of dance and choreography we have within our romantic partners. So, for example, when I'm really clear and upfront with even my husband what it is I'm consenting to, I find that I'm more willing to lean into that pleasure because I can relax, because I've built that trust with him, and I know that we're in a safe place. But that doesn't mean I'm always feeling safe. Being a survivor, I have dealt with a lot of trauma and a lot of um, you know how to say this, like kind of a recalibration of my sex life, and that's been really difficult for my partner. I'll be very honest, but we continue to build and work the muscle of a safe space. And so what I find is that when I've been really clear and upfront, like I just want to cuddle tonight, that then I can relax and I can enjoy that moment so much more when I know that that's all that we're going to do, you know? Um, and so that basically brings me to the last C, which is closed set, which, is kind of funny, but basically the way I relate that to our lives is that, we create the space. And maybe for you, that is making sure that you won't be interrupted, from the kids or um, calls, or maybe it's lighting a candle or playing certain music or wearing a certain outfit. Like, you get to create your set, your stage in life. And sometimes for me, that can feel kind of silly. And so it's a practice, again, working that muscle to do things that ultimately I know are going to create a safe, fun, pleasurable experience for me in that closed set. So, and consent again is ongoing. It is something that can shift and it can change. So when I'm on a closed set with actors, I'm always looking, making eye contact, and making sure that they still are consenting and that things are still going as planned. And that is something I challenge you to do with yourself and with your partner in those situations. And so, yes, in closing, I just want to recognize that as survivors, that I know firsthand that every person's healing journey is unique and it's never over. And I encourage you to be courageous and to possibly, look within and to take some of those offerings to hopefully expand the pleasure in your life. Um, if there is one question that I'd like to kind of leave you with, it's you know to ask yourself, where in my life can I create a stronger boundary that could lead to a freer, more pleasurable experience. And so, with that, I just want to thank you all for your ears, for your eyes, for your presence, for your open hearts, and your willingness to show up and to be a courageous person for yourself. I just want to say you got this. And yes, I'm here to answer any and all questions. So back to you, Ashley.
Hey, Sarah, thank you so much. That was incredible. And as I was looking at the comments, I was just seeing so many people commenting. We've got up to, the hearts keep going up. We've got like 75 hearts coming in, flying at us in the comment section. And so many people have just been really engaged. So thank you for sharing this. It's been so many good tips. And I just want to open it up now. Everybody, this is your opportunity. How many times in your life do you have an opportunity to talk to someone like Sarah Scott, somebody who is a professional intimacy coordinator in Hollywood? I mean, this is like a once in a lifetime opportunity. So if you've got questions or comments, you want clarity on something that she said, please drop that in the comments. I'm going to be looking at those. And the first comment I saw, I just want to be able to kick us off with this, is somebody asked for you to maybe go into detail a little bit on what it means to be a diva. And my thought was, I heard you talk about how that was something you were called when you spoke up for yourself. And maybe could you talk about some of the ways that, whether it's called being a diva or something else, that can show up for survivors in general?
That's so funny. It's an interesting question. I mean, I guess we all have our own, you know, perspective on what a diva is, but I mean, you could look at it as a very positive thing. A diva is, you know, I think that in the context that I was called a diva, it was in a way telling me or saying, trying to belittle me, actually, to say like, oh, she's just trying to make this all about her. She's not really thinking about the production or about the overall project. She's trying to, she's being difficult. She's not showing up. Divas in my mind, like somebody who has no kind of concern about others and the time commitment that everybody has on set. So somebody who shows up really late, who might have a little bit of cachet to their name and knows that they're not going to necessarily get fired for showing up late, might show up super late, and the whole crew and everybody else is just kind of waiting around. That to me would be like, oh, they're a little bit of a diva. But then again, I guess the flip side is like somebody who's super empowered and like totally cool with like speaking out, and like I was, having a hard no and saying, I'm not going to do this because I'm not going to do this. I don't need to give you any other explanation other than I don't want to. And I never said I would. So if you're going to call that a diva, then I want to be a diva. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
That's really good. It sounds like being a diva can be used as like a negative term, but we could actually swap the definition of it, and it really could mean just standing in your power. And if somebody's going to call you a diva for that, like stand in your power all day long. Okay, we've got another question. Let me pop this one up on the screen. It says, is your sense of pleasure more embodied now? If you care to share how this expresses itself in you, and how it has affected your life outside of the bedroom and outside of your work as well. So maybe talk about how maybe pleasure is more embodied for you now.
That's a great question. Yeah, as I got into a little bit, I think that getting really clear for me on my desires, is like it kind of it has given me more confidence, and as I said, being in a state where whether I'm out with friends and maybe I want to go home early that night, and I might have thought before like, oh, I have to stay out, oh, it's like, no, what I really desire is to go home and put my feet up, and like that's what's going to give me the most pleasure. And and so knowing and trusting that like I'm not going to piss off my friends so much they're not going to be my friends, I can now act in more of a centered place and make choices and make, I don't say yes to every project. Maybe it's a project that, doesn't really feel like something I want to do. And I don't have to operate from a place of lack or thinking that like, oh, nobody's ever going to call me again. It's like, what is really, when I'm in tune with my desires and what it is that I want, I more easily make choices that that feed those desires and that feed my strength. Um, the second part of the question, what was that again? Just
Yeah,
about.
it was talking about being embodied, and then if
Mm,
you care to express how it expresses now, and then how it's affected your life outside of the bedroom as well as inside. So I think you kind of answered some of that, but if you have
yeah,
any other thoughts.
I mean, just to say that, you know, I think that in the bedroom, I do find that full-fledged adults, even me as an intimacy coordinator, I still find that it is challenging to speak up and to really, even with somebody I trust so deeply, it can still be challenging. So I find that like that self-trust and that self-love are so key to me, just to be rooted in that which I want, and knowing that again it's not about upsetting or rocking the boat or um, coming from a place of lack, but just knowing that like, hey, I'm standing here in my power. This is what I want. This is, take it or leave it, and trusting that that's going to be enough. That's going to be okay.
Mm, so good. So good. We've got another question here. It says, Sarah, what would be the ideal partner who embodies the pillars of consent? So maybe talk about like what somebody should look for in a partner who embodies those pillars.
Well, right. I mean, I think a good way to achieve that is just right off the bat. Is someone making eye contact? Are they engaged? Are they listening? Do they remember things that you've said? Maybe you share something very personal, and is that person reflecting back to you the kind of response that feels appropriate and feels good to you, makes you feel safe? um, we can practice consent with little things, non-triggering things, in places that are safe, so that we can build that trust. And um, yeah, I would say being a good listener, being also somebody who's a good expressor. Again, practicing that which in verbalizing that which we want, and seeing how it's reciprocated and seeing how it's landing, by making eye contact and watching for those physical cues, is a great way to kind of determine, even on a first date, is this person really picking up, that I'm not really into it. Maybe I haven't said I really don't like this movie, but like they're kind of picking it up anyway. So to say, so like little cues like that, little kind of ways in which we can sort of test the water. Is this person um, taking an interest in what I'm really saying, and what I really need and want?
Mm,
And I think slowing down, making eye contact, taking time, and those are all really good ways to practice consent, as I said.
it's so good.
But yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And if there's something to add, I can see your mind.
Yeah,
Yeah, wanting to.
it's just giving me so many thoughts. It just kind of strikes me that kind of what happens in the bedroom is often a microcosm of the relationship as a whole. And also at the same time, other ways people relate to you outside the bedroom is probably going to reflect how they respond and act to you in the bedrooms. Like you said, things like, are they showing empathy? Are they interested? Are they paying attention to your body cues? Like, I know for myself, my husband, he's really good at that. Um, just like everyday things, he will be like, "Yeah, you're not really into that, are you?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not."
Right.
He can tell that I'm not gonna like a movie before I say, like he can just tell my face.
Yep.
And so that's why I think I feel really safe with him in the bedroom, because I know that he's always connected to, as a pattern in our entire relationship, what is kind of a cue for like a yes or no, or interest or disinterest. And that kind of brings me, we have several other questions here, but one question that I had kind of along this communication line is, how do you communicate your boundaries, your interests and disinterests, without kind of like ruining the mood? Because sometimes you just want things to be a little bit different, but you don't want to like shut down the whole,
Mm.
time together or that intimacy. Do you have any tips for that?
Hmm. You know, I think I'm not sure I do. I think it's a really good question, and I completely empathize with that notion because in my own struggles to achieve like the greatest pleasure and greatest kind of trust, it can totally have that effect. If you come across too hard, you might kill the mood, so to speak. But I think that if you're okay, um, practicing having the conversation beforehand, let's say,
Mm,
really creating that boundary before entering into that space, as I was saying in the talk, then you could give a little nudge or reminder because you've already
mm,
had that conversation. I think there's a misnomer that by um speaking about these things, it's like takes it desexualizes it in our
yeah.
lives. But I have found that to actually be the opposite. I've actually
Hmm.
found that you know by having those super vulnerable conversations, it opens up a lot of space for vulnerability, which to me leads to pleasure because I'm able to relax more when I'm vulnerable. And so,
Mm,
similar to those conversations that I have with the director, and then you know with the actors, and um, even talking about something, maybe you and your partner are going to try something new, or, it can be actually kind of a turn on to be having those conversations in a non sexual,
right.
outside the bedroom, kind of like a foreplay, so to speak.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
you know, we think that, like, oh, everything has to be spontaneous, but actually, there can be a lot of buildup when an excitement building, when we have little conversations beforehand.
That's a good idea, because sometimes
Yeah.
planting in your mind like what's going to happen, and then also like putting the boundaries that feel safe kind of builds that excitement. And I've also found that I thought it was really hot while we were dating, when my husband, like, he wasn't my husband then, but like he would ask me like, "Can I hold your hand?" or "Can I rub your back?" And like just the little
Mm.
steps, like him actually asking that. Number one, was the first time I'd been in a relationship where somebody expressed a desire to get my consent, but it really didn't turn off the mood. It was just like, "Ooh, ooh,"
No, bring up
what's he
a
gonna ask
really good point.
next?
Actually, I love that. In fact, there's a whole consent exercise that we do both in the workspace, but it
Mhm,
totally translates. It is that, and it can start really small,
mhm.
and it can be fun, and it could be
Yeah,
something that, like, can I touch your hand, like something
yeah.
non-triggering, just like, and it is, if you feel, I mean, even when you said that, I was like, oh, that's just so sweet. It just made me feel so good. What do you you know?
Yeah, your screen froze up for a second there, but you're back now.
Oh.
Okay, so we've got a few more questions. This is from somebody who says, what advice would you have for someone who's never been physically intimate with anyone? And I think that there's probably a good deal of people in our community because a lot of people in our community have come from maybe religious environments that really discouraged having sexual intercourse before marriage, and maybe a person isn't married. And then in addition to that, I think we've even seen statistically with millennials, there's a lot less sex being happen in this generation. And so I think it's a good question, for somebody who maybe hasn't been physically intimate with somebody, what would your advice be for like setting up those boundaries and getting ready for that first time?
Wow. Okay, so I just want to preface this question or this answer by saying that I do not feel that I am in any way, I'm not a sex therapist and I'm not a sex coach. So I do feel that I don't know that I have the greatest answer for you. And I think it's a really important question. And I really, I love that you asked this question. I think what I will say is sort of piggybacking on what we just talked about, which is, let's say you're dating someone and you're thinking about having an experience, and you don't want to come across as weird or like strange that you're like wanting, but maybe as Ashley just said, this example of like the small things of gauging somebody's interest and consent with smaller things like, can I hold your hand?
Mm,
Would you like, would you like me to kiss you? And based on their eye contact, how their face responds to that, how their body responds, you're going to know really quickly if somebody wants to be kissed or not.
yeah.
And then, and then you can build on that, because the next time you're together, and again, a consent is ongoing. So the next time you're together, they may not want to kiss, but you may not have to ask that time. Maybe you could
Hmm.
just lean in and
Yeah.
see, are they leaning back or are
Right.
they leaning to meet you,
Yeah. Yeah.
And then if you start to rove your hand, down their back, do they pull away, or
Hmm.
are they starting to rove their hand? So I would say take it slow. You do not need to rush sex. And sometimes the most exciting, pleasurable things are not penetrative, actual
Yeah.
sex.
Especially for
But again,
women, they're often not
yeah,
penetrant.
yeah. But I do want to
Vagina
be clear
havers.
that I am not a sex. I do not know. I mean, I am not a sex therapist, so I do feel slightly
Yeah.
uncomfortable giving super professional advice about that.
Right. No, I think that's really helpful. And I think I want to end with a really kind of a funny story just to kind of follow up with that question. Um, I was a virgin when me and my husband got married, and I grew up in a cult like environment. And guys, tune in for my talk next week because I'm going to be talking about growing up in the cult, how to spot cults, all the things. Little plug for next week. But I had made a vow not to kiss somebody until the altar. Like that was how conservative we were. And I never had. The most I'd ever done was like a quick hug. Um, and when I started changing my beliefs and dating my husband, like I told him, like, I'm not planning to kiss till the altar. And he was like, okay, well, that's fine. And I was really glad that he responded that way, and it made me want to kiss him all the more because he was telling me that was fine. But then about 2 months or so into our engagement, I was finally like, we're gonna do this. And we were driving down the road on the highway, and I was like, it's time, I'm going to kiss you. And he was like, okay. And he pulled off to the first exit, and we parked in a parking lot outside of a movie theater. And it was like 12 a.m. in the morning. And I don't think we even took our seatbelts off. But we had our first kiss, and he was like, are you ready? And I'm like, Yes. I was smiling all day long, but just even that after I had said it, he was just like, "Are you sure?" Um, that
Oh, bless
was
your
such a
hearts. That is so
memorable thing.
sweet.
So if somebody else hasn't been intimate before, like, don't feel shame about it. I the only thing I regret is having shame about waiting, but it
Mhm.
it turned out fine in the end. So yeah. Um, but yeah,
That's a
Sarah, this
beautiful
is
story.
so good. Thank you. I loved seeing all the comments come in, and you'll have to check them out in the group because people said such positive things about this conversation. I think right
Good.
now we're at like 374 hearts on the video, so awesome. But yeah, any final things that you'd like to leave us with, or any thoughts that you give to a survivor listening?
Um, well, if you haven't listened to Brene Brown's TED Talk on vulnerability, I love that because this is very vulnerable work,
Mm,
and um, it does take a lot of courage to speak up on what it is that we want. So practice it, try to de-shame, like you said. There's no shame in being a beginner, and in and it's just so wonderful if you have the tools in a new relationship or an old relationship where you can start building the
mm.
foundation of more consent work. It's I think it's going to prove to be a healthy, long lasting one. So no, I'm just so grateful I got to be part of this. Ashley, thank you for inviting me into this space.
Absolutely. Ah, Sarah, thank you so, so much.